Welcome to the Voices of Hospice Leadership podcast, the show that reveals how to take your hospice to the next level. We cover all things hospice, from marketing and automation to billing and operations. You'll also hear from professionals in the industry as they share their stories of success and practice growth tactics. Here is your host, Brian Frantz.
Welcome, everyone. Another episode. Today on the podcast, I'm excited to welcome someone who brings a powerful and often underrepresented perspective in the hospice world. So, Keely, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your background in hospice?
I've been a nurse longer than I hate to admit. Can't give away my age. But my journey into hospice care, it actually started very young in my nursing career. My college had a seminar towards the end of our nursing program right before we took all of our big tests. And I just remember watching this video that they played and just having this gut feeling that, this is where I need to be. This is where my attention belongs. And I know that, being a new grad, I had to go into the hospitals, kind of pay my dues, learn the needed skills before I was able to kind of transition over to hospice. So it took about 2 years, and then I was just bugging the inpatient hospice team every time I saw them for when a position was open. So when they finally said, yeah, we actually do have a case manager position open, I just jumped on it, and it's been pretty much woven through my nursing career since.
Awesome. And what would you say inspired you to get into this field?
I would say really my hospice why was my grandmother died 125 days before my wedding. And it was when I was still in nursing school. She did hospice care at my parents' house. And I just remember really watching my dad struggle to, take care of her and not know really how to filter out all the emotions that he was feeling and the emotional burden of just being his mom's caregiver. And once my grandmother had gone into her active phase, my dad was calling, asking the hospice for guidance. And I'll never forget what they told him. And it was basically that, her apneic periods are normal, and just give them a call when she passes. So it wasn't like, hey, let's try this, let's do this. Can you come, make a visit, help put you at ease? Nothing. And even being greener than green at the time, I think it was like my first semester of nursing school. I just knew this is not the way it should be. There should be way more to what we're offering people at end of life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that experience really inspired you to take that step into hospice. Got it. And so, what does a typical day look like for you, and how has it evolved over time?
My typical day usually starts an hour before regular business hours. I love having kind of that 1 hour uninterrupted to catch up on everything that happened overnight or the weekend, kind of figure out what's going on with my branches, review my metrics, and just really take the time with any important subjects that I know are going to need my undivided attention, as well as to just really kind of stop, center myself, and prepare for the day. And then once regular hours starts, it's meetings, schedule reviews, emails, you name it, phone calls, putting out fires, and more meetings. So, it's usually a pretty busy day. And, typically over time, I've found, we all start with, your base kind of ideals of what you should be doing as like an administrator. And kind of the more ingrained you get into your company, you slowly pick up other little nuances and jobs along the way. So, whether it's helping the NP scheduling team now, or being a resource for other directors and admins across the state, or fielding clinical questions from the sales team, you kind of become that jack of all trades catch-all that the person thinks, hey, if I have a question, I better call her and see.
Right. Awesome. One of the things that we first talked about when we first talked is how much heart you bring to your work and the emotional toll that can come with that. And so I'd love to talk about something that's important yet maybe doesn't get spoken about a lot, and that's caregiver burnout. And so from your perspective, what does burnout look like in hospice care?
With hospice care, funny thing is, your first round in hospice, it usually happens pretty quickly. I'd say usually within about a year, year and a half. If you're new to it, not used to it, you're going to burn out. And some of the early signs really just kind of slowly evolve and people become quieter. And generally, all of a sudden, the person that was usually ready to go, any little thing that goes wrong or any additional request from a family member or a patient just kind of starts setting them off. And you can kind of see that flip in their personality where everything stops being kind of a rewarding gift that we're offering and turns in more to a burden for them.
Yeah. And what are some early signs that someone might maybe carrying a little too much?
Um, Really, the early signs are generally like the documentation, making sure like the important things like meds getting ordered timely, or supplies getting ordered. We're getting a lot more calls from the families, especially grouped around that certain case manager, and it just kind of starts telling you, okay, they're starting to really struggle in an area, and that's when we have to really stop and say, okay, bring them in from a area of understanding and trying to understand what they're going through, really kind of start digging in to see, is it an outside influence that's causing these new behaviors, or is it truly that they're just burnt out and they don't know how to handle with the stress and the pressure of what hospice can be.
Got it. Yeah. And how do you personally navigate the emotional toll of the work?
I protect my peace at all costs. It's taken a really long time to do it, and it's only really been in like about the past 2 years that I've been able to really keep myself in alignment. I do a lot of breathing exercises, frequency music, meditation, and sometimes it just takes me reminding myself of my own power. And it's vital to just help make sure I don't slip into that fight or flight response, because once that happens, I'm of no use to my team, especially if I start getting angry, frustrated. I like to be that calm, cool, collected person in the most chaotic experience.
Yeah.
That way, my energy can then reflect to my team, so then their anxiety then goes down.
Yeah. Got it. And what role does leadership play in supporting staff emotionally?
It's absolutely critical. I think gone are the days of the closed door. I've always been a person that said, getting into leadership, I don't want to be the person that my team is afraid to talk to. I don't want to be that suit that walks in and everybody's like, oh no, why are they here? So my goal is to always approach everything on a level where communication can be calm and effective. My team should not have to absorb anything from me, and that way they can focus on what they need to pretty much bring to me, tell me, go through with me. And then from my aspect, I have to focus and live in the present and really kind of stop everything, make sure that, my phones are not a distraction, and give that person my true attention. And it's really important to have that open communication, because then if you make a mistake, you don't mind being accountable for it, because you're not going to get a slap on the wrist for it. You'll talk through it. We'll figure out how to fix it. We're all adults. We all make mistakes.
Right.
So, and I mean, can't even tell you the amount of times I've had, team members just sitting in my office breaking down, whether it's work related, home related, but they just needed someone to vent to. And when you are there and present with that person and give them your full attention, it makes all the difference in building the trust with just your leadership versus staffing relationship, as well as just human to human.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And what do you think? What do you want? What would you want owners and administrators to really understand about the emotional burden of direct care?
I think the most important thing is it's there, and we don't wear it on our sleeves. We learn to put those walls up, and despite the concrete that we build, there's going to be patients and families that get through and essentially traumatize us when they pass. I mean, we work every day with the angel of death over our shoulders, and it actually is a very heavy burden to carry. So make sure that whatever you do, show grace and compassion.
Yeah. Got it. So acknowledge it's there and show grace and compassion. Um, are there specific things you or your organization does now currently or could do better to support caregivers?
Yeah, we actually have our bereavement counselors. They're not only available to our staff and our families, or not, I'm sorry, they're available to our staff and our families. It's not just simply for our patients and families. Um, but I think, across the nation, we get so hooked into Western medicine as a whole that we forget that death is a holistic experience. It isn't always just about the body dying. It needs to be really embracing the spirit of the soul and the connections it created and how those connections are lost and the emotion and energies that get slammed into our team members that have to work through it. So my thing I think we could always do better is start incorporating and teaching healing techniques to our caregivers. Because being a nurse myself, we won't ask. We're stubborn. And whether, like I said, it's meditation, breath work, centering yourself, stretching, I say to my most stressed out, team members, if you need to scream into the universe and just scream, doesn't have to be a word, or you can scream a word. Just let it out and get that energy off you so it doesn't just sit and fester on them.
Yeah, love it. Thank you for sharing that. It's clear how deeply this work really impacts not just patients and families, but also the caregivers and the staff themselves. And that leads to something I'd like to explore and look at is the role of culture and communication in a hospice setting. So, in your experience, what does a healthy team culture look like?
Um, for hospice and really most teams, it's accountability, plain and simple. It's when the team is accountable to not just their patients and families and facilities, but really they're accountable to each other. And once that happens and everybody is pulling their own weight or admitting to their own mistakes, there really ends up being very little breakdown in communication and very few misunderstandings at that point.
Yeah, love it. And how does communication, especially from leadership, shape that day-to-day experience for staff?
Um, it's really one of those things that there's no big testimonial that says, this is going to fix everything. I think the most important thing is the little everyday things that, the team can do with each other. So it's being transparent with each other. It's making sure that, we're not having knee-jerk responses to everything that's going on. It's really setting kind of the standard that, hey, something's going on. I'm going to contact the entire team and not just one person.
Yeah.
And if something does go wrong, we discuss it not necessarily as a blame game, but as an education that says, hey, we had the situation that pops up. This is what we should do to going forward. And on top of that, what other ideas do you guys have that can help make sure that, we're giving our patients the best possible care as well as fostering our love for what we do with each other?
Love it. Can you share an example of a time when great communication between leadership and staff really made a difference?
Um, yeah, I would probably say one of the biggest ones was at one of my branches when I first started with them. It was really struggling with just a various amount of issues. It wasn't just one process broken. There was quite a few. And I remember the knee-jerk response was, well, oh, it's got to be this person. And I was like, hold up. We don't know what we don't know. Give me time to work with the team. I was like, I generally say I have an empath's heart. I read people, and this person had a true love for what they did. So I really thought it may be just a little something else. So I really started to kind of dig in and worked with them and come to find out there was numerous things in her orientation that she had never learned. And hospice, something brand new comes up every day. So we really kind of dug in, figured out the strengths, the weaknesses, and focused on them. And I aligned myself, as her partner and resource And that way, when mistakes happen, like I said, there was no fear of repercussion, but we figured out how to make it an educational experience. And, it could have been simple things like, they're writing emails versus picking up the phone, and emails can be misconstrued however the reader feels at that time. It can be happy, and if they're already frustrated, a simple sentence can be misconstrued into, oh my gosh, you're accusing me of something. So after working through all this, something just clicked, and you kind of started seeing the shift with the team. And after a while, we just did a complete 180 and ended up having, a very strong retention, outperforming all of our budget goals for the year, and ended up being a top branch in Michigan.
Awesome. Yeah, well done. Yeah, everything you shared, from the emotional challenges to the importance of team culture, really paints a picture of what caregivers are going through, or are dealing with. And I know many of our listeners, admins and executives, may be asking themselves, like, how can I better support my team? So what advice would you give to owners or administrators who want to reduce staff turnover?
Um, I'd say really just remember that your team members are the driving force for your companies. They're people, they're not necessarily always FTEs, but these are also the people that can make or break your companies. So, as great as data is, and it can drive a lot, it doesn't always show the full picture. So, never be so far removed from the front line that you start to demand more and more without truly understanding what one of their days looks like. Because what may seem like, oh, it's just 5 visits in a day, that's not much. There's actually a lot more behind the scenes than just what our, click charting says.
Yeah.
And ask for their input. Shared governance is incredibly successful in finding solutions to problems. Plus, it gives the team a voice in advocating for themselves, their patients, and helping them kind of decide how their day runs. And that usually helps with the buy-in. Like, hey, you're trusting me to help you solve a problem when I'm the one out doing it. So guess what? You then get the reward of my happiness and everything I bring to your table when I care for your patients.
Yeah. Yeah, beyond the 5 visits, there's so much more at the charting and the phone calls and all kinds of other things. Yeah. If you had the ear of a hospice owner for 5 minutes, what would you want them to know?
Um, Along the same lines, emotional intelligence is your strongest asset. It doesn't matter how big your organization is. If you don't understand the people who work for you, then you're already at a disadvantage. Explore ways to better understand who works for you and their personalities, because we don't all communicate the same way. Someone texting or emailing me saying, hey, I need to talk to you, could very easily send me into a panic attack, because I'm going to start overthinking everything I've done wrong or I thought I did wrong in the past 6 months. When honestly, it's just like, hey, I wanted to say you did a great job.
Yeah.
But really understanding, your people and how they communicate is extremely effective, because not everybody communicates the same way. You have your very type A people, your very type B people, you have your very loud, boisterous people, and then you have, kind of your more introverted sit back, and you have to know how to communicate with each person and how to kind of flip the script in communicating the same message to everyone individually.
Yeah. Awesome share. What's something leadership could do today that would make a big difference to the team?
Lead from a place of understanding, and if you don't understand, seek to understand. If somebody on your team is getting angry or short all the time, find out why. If someone's late on charting, don't just assume they're being lazy or they don't feel like doing it. Find out why. I mean, again, we're all human, we slip up. And a lot of it is just kind of finding that understanding within another human being, which, hey, again, we said we're humans, we're not numbers. So figuring out, is it an outside influence? Is it an inside influence? Is there something, just in our process that is driving them crazy? And then once you do that, you can kind of work a little bit more on adding the personal touch to it too, because I like it when people ask me about, my personal life at work. It doesn't necessarily have to be something big, but, how are the kids? How are the pets? Something simple like that, because sometimes it just reminds you that, oh, they do see me as more than just, a worker bee. They
Yeah,
actually see me as, a person who's here to do a good job for them. So,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I think this has been a really honest and powerful conversation. And thank you again for being so open and sharing your heart and your perspective. Before we wrap up, I'd love to ask a few final questions to reflect on the deeper side of the work. What is the most rewarding part of the job?
I know everyone's expecting me to say that it's making sure that each patient is able to pass with dignity and respect. And, that is true. But for me and what I do, it's really seeing the growth of a team that works together and is really patient centered and can honestly make the impossible possible every day.
Yeah,
And it's really rewarding because when this happens, the rest just falls into place. Your patients are getting the best care. Your families are, happy and communicated with. Your facilities don't have to worry about anything. And, they're the ones reaping the reward from everybody just working together. So,
awesome. Is there a story or a moment that stuck with you? Something that reminds you why you chose this path?
there's actually quite a few. I mean, every time I kind of start getting a little burnout myself, I find myself somehow out on a visit, and it really does just being out with the patients restores, your reminder and your drive for why we do what we do. But I would say, like, one that really sticks out to me is I was on a death visit, and it was a very difficult case, and the wife was very overwhelmed with, caring for her husband. He ended up passing kind of suddenly, so there wasn't that kind of preparatory reactive period. And when I got to the home, she was just going a million miles an hour, and I had to stop, take stock of the situation, and just very calmly told her, okay, you did your thing, it's my turn, so you get to relax and let me take over.
Yeah.
So we were kind of waiting for her son and family to show up, and, got her kind of distracted while I took care of all the arrangements. And once her son had shown up and we were just kind of waiting for the funeral home, we just ended up chatting, and our kids had crossed paths in their sports, and it kind of turned from kind of a doom and gloom, what are we going to do now, to we just started talking sports. And the granddaughters were there and they were talking, and we're finding out more and more of how much we've actually crossed paths. And the grandma's chiming in, telling me all the good news on there. And when I left it, I really didn't think like it was this extraordinary event. But later on, our bereavement coordinator had called her just to check in and, give condolences, see how things were going. And she just kind of told her, she's like, you know what? For as traumatic as all of that was, thank the blonde girl for coming and just talking to us, because she's like, she totally made that experience so much better, because then I could remember that there's still a whole life going on, and this one pivotal moment doesn't have to define the rest of it. She's like, there is so much more to look forward to. So what seemed like nothing really serious to me and just one of those little things meant the world to her during that tough time. So that really sticks with me, that it doesn't have to be the big things that make the changes. Sometimes it's the small things that really do, move the world.
Love that. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. And on a personal level, how do you take care of yourself and refill your own cup after the kind of days this job can bring?
I focus a ton on my family. They fill my cup every day. They keep me ridiculously busy, unpaid Uber driver until they get their licenses. But a lot of times, even after the worst day, the fact that my kids will track me on Life 360 and be like, are you almost home? And then just talk to me my entire way home. And I have to get all the information about what happened with sports and school and boys. And, it really just kind of helps melt away the stress of the day. And I think one of the most important things I do is, once I finally do find that quiet, is just stop and be grateful and, just kind of speak my thanks to the universe for all the blessings, big and small, and all the challenges that have taught me lessons. So it's really just kind of humbling myself before the universe and making sure that, we're still in sync and we have each other's backs.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think that's it for today's episode. A huge thank you again for Keely and for giving us an inside look at the emotional side of hospice and the part that doesn't always get talked about. So if you're a hospice owner or executive, I hope today's conversation gives you a deeper understanding of the challenges your team faces and some of the practical ways to better support them. So hope you found value in this episode. Make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone. But thanks again for listening. And thank you so much again, Keely, for your time. And we'll see you next time.
If you're looking to attract more families and share your hospice mission with a wider community, visit hospicecaremarketing.com/schedule to schedule your free consultation with marketing expert and founder, Brian Frantz. Plus, join our free Hospice Marketing Mastermind group on LinkedIn to connect with other practice leaders and stay up to date with the latest strategies. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave us a 5-star review. We'd love to hear from you.